Thank you very much, Beth. Good morning, everybody. I believe we live in a VUCA world, and we've seen already some examples for this one this morning. What does VUCA stand for? It stands for volatile, uncertain, complex, and ambiguous. The times we live in at the moment. Just think about it. We're in Frankfurt at the moment. I still remember a conversation that I had around about 5 years ago, early 2008, about how safe bank investments are and will be, and see where we are at the moment on this one. Another area where I reminded how fast changing and how volatile the world is was when I was the strategy manager for one of the products at Procter & Gamble. I was once strategy manager for dishwashing liquid, Strategieleiter Spülmittel for the Germans in here. And I don't know, whenever I share that with a PMI audience, I can see the envy in the eyes from you on this title. Yes, these roles exist over there. But if I go back in that time, it was in 2004, I was thinking, okay, I will be doing lots of fancy strategic analysis, mergers and acquisitions. Back in 2004, all of a sudden what happened is the oil price doubled, tripled, and so on. And believe it or not, that product here, for example, is highly tied to commodity prices. All of a sudden, I was not doing any fancy 5-year outlook plan. We were looking at re-business modeling the whole thing, the whole, so to speak, dishwashing business on how to survive and how to manage, navigate through this very fast-paced change of the cost structure here. Probably the most important example that I've seen recently about how fast the change is, I think in the presentation of Joe this morning, we were also already talking about the Pope. And I've seen a fantastic piece recently, actually this weekend, on the Pope elections, the conclave, and how that compares to 2005. And there's somebody put together from NBC News, put together a little picture of what it looked like, so to speak, back in 2005 then, and what it looked like right now in 2013. And you can see they're full of tablets and iPhones and so on. Just in 8 small years, the whole range of how we equipped, how we use technology has changed dramatically. And actually, this whole field of connectedness, this whole new Gen Y generation that we talk about that is fully equipped, that is in the net and so on, is one of my deep topics that I look at with organizations on how they can manage, how you can lead in these organizations with these people that are so hyper-connected, and also what we can learn from it. And what I want to share with you today, a couple of ideas on that leadership. So what I want to go through is like the little cycle of leadership, what we know from the past years and from the decades and centuries and millennia, that what makes great leadership, and what is the cycle of that. And basically, there are 5 big areas that I want to go through. We will look at envisioning, which is one of the key elements of leadership, how to enroll others in it, how to enable others to do their job right, how to motivate them, and then how to implement it. A full cycle of leadership. But what I want to do there is not to look at the fundamentals or the theory of it, but I want to give you some 5 very practical tools of leadership, something that I've tested out in my work, working a lot, especially leading teams of this Generation Y. But all kind of like very practical ideas and tools that you can take over with. So I mentioned to you 5 areas, and I want to start with the 6th area, actually. And before we have to go in these fields of the leadership cycle, I need to share a couple of thoughts on the fundamentals before we even can talk about engaging in high-performance leadership in that scenario. For this one of the projects, one of the areas that I look at the moment as well with the university work, with the University of Lüneburg, is how we can work and how we can lead in that new field. And what we look at here is a lot swarm-based leadership. We look there, fields, the new and recent trend for the micro-multinational, for project swarms, projects and organizations. And one of the fields that especially we look at are some of the more extreme scenarios of leadership. And one field that we go and look at is actually World of Warcraft. Now, some of you might have heard about this. World of Warcraft looks a little bit like this, what you can see here. World of Warcraft is a game of roughly 10, 11 million participants. What is the scenario there? You have to pay to be in there. People pay up to 10 euros per month to join this. People are there anonymous, and they join in virtually, talking about virtual project teams, they join in virtually, and you don't know their real names. Now, what happens in this World of Warcraft very often, in order to move and progress in this game, you actually have to gain points and credits and so on, and what you need to do then sometimes is join a larger team or group, and these are called guilds. And what we've started to look at is the people who lead these guilds, these project teams that go out and fight some swarms or dragons and so on, how do they actually lead? And I will share with you two of the key things of what they do most of the time in a second, but one thing that is absolutely, that came out of this, like when you interview, when you talk to those folks, one thing doesn't work at all. And that is, we heard it already before, the micromanagement, directing everybody. Just imagine that scenario, everybody is paid to do or is paying to join that team, and they are joining voluntarily. If then the guild leader started and would be saying like, okay, I will do now that, have you done this, have you done your preparation? What would happen immediately would be the people would go like, they would go. So the core first lesson that we have in this 21st century leadership one is don't, of course, be a micromanager, as we've already heard. Now, more practically, probably more connected to you, is one of the most challenging leadership sessions or scenarios that I had once was when I was having most of my team co-located with me in Brussels, but one person was new and was located in Poland. And I was thinking there, okay, now let's do, he's new to the company as well, so we'll do a little video conferences every morning, 8:30, let's do a little video conference until he's there. I did that up until I saw one advertisement from FedEx, actually. They have, very brilliant, you can watch it also on YouTube. They were basically saying that they had a very similar scenario, a boss, a manager standing there, having a team on the other side, and he was like, okay, when are you going to do that? Yeah, boss, we're all over it, we're on it, we're going to do it, we're there. And all of a sudden, that nice little, bright little white screen there toggled down, and you could see the team being on a golf course and so on. And they said, oh, he's managing it. And then they were just trashing it down and so on. And I realized, well, what I was doing at the moment is I was trying to control that other person via technology means, but there's no way I can tell where he is actually at the moment. He can put like a lot of stuff on and so on in the background. So the fundamentals, before we go in any kind of leadership area that we have is, I want to quote here a person, an advisor to Hillary Clinton there, the 21st century at the moment with the technologies and so on that we have out there, it's a pretty terrible time to be a control freak. Having said that, starting here, then we go into the field of vision and envisioning. Now, we've heard it already this morning, envisioning. Vision is one of the key tasks of a leader, setting out a vision, setting out the direction. Many of you will have visions, will have seen visions. And there's even the Dilbert mission and vision generator that is out there. So I don't want to talk too much about what to create a vision, but I think it's absolutely fundamental that a leader sets out a direction. Now, one of the tools that has worked extremely well for me and that I want to share with you on this one is actually, as part of that vision, show what is possible and to find ideas that was possible. So one of the times I was responsible for the manufacturing update and for the optimization of a series of plants, manufacturing plants. And one of the key challenges that we saw there, that we found out there, was that changeover times were really, really long. They took very long, like how they changed over from one product to another product and so on. That was seen as a key problem. So what one person in the team then came up, and what we then finally used as well as one of the key communication tools or communication means, basically, to show out where we want to go, is they looked at, okay, let's look at a related field. Let's look, for example, at Formula One. How did, over the past decades and so on, the changeover times in Formula One have progressed and have optimized and have changed over the years? What we found is like from double digit, they went down, for example, in 2012, McLaren did a changeover just of tires in 2.4 seconds. That story, taking that example and putting it forward to that team and to all the manufacturing teams helped them a lot. That really motivated going forward. So what I encourage you to do is like find out, whenever you think about your vision, find the examples, write it down wherever you are. That is the key task of a leader, to really build for that vision. Now, when you communicate that vision, or when you communicate these stories, I think we can communicate them, and we've heard the importance of numbers before. Yes, we can communicate this by putting all kinds of graphs, numbers, figures, and so on in it. However, that I think needs to be balanced, and we see there now in the 21st century resurrection of an age-old tool of communication that I think all leaders, when they communicate their vision, need to have. And that is the good old tool of storytelling. We've heard some examples here this morning in the presentation on change and agile, and just the presentation right now. And this story can extremely help. Storytelling as a leader is not as hard. I've recently seen, and I will share it with you in a second, the Pixar method of storytelling. They say, Pixar, this Finding Nemo and so on. They said storytelling is basically simple. All of our stories follow like this. Once upon a time, there was something every day, one day, because of that, until finally. Like in the Hobbits, every day there was, once upon a time, there was a land of the Hobbits. Every day they were walking around until one day Gandalf the Wizard came around. Because of that, they went out and fought the dragon, until finally they came on. Once upon a time, we heard the other stories here. Once upon a time, there was a young boy, I think it was Fred Finkenberg, who had a vision, who needed to go out in the school. And because of that, in the end, he had 12 million trees planted. I think these kind of stories, complemented with the right data, are the ones that are really, really important to communicate our vision, to get people on board. Then, after we've set up the vision, the next key task of the leader in the model, in the standard process of leadership, is to enroll others on this task, to get them on board. Now, for this one also, I want to look at the recent developments in technology. And we've heard that co-located agile project teams are the must. Now, I think that is probably not how every day for all of you looks like. Chances are high that very often, every day looks a little bit like this for you. All right, let me send this email, email is out, email is out, email is out. All right, now the phone call. I have a phone call. Let me update the microblog, write a bit. And then let me do the video conference here with my new team. So that was it, work went well today. Really, if we think about how to enroll others in this new technology world, I think we need to assess a little bit what came out on the other side. And for this one, let's explore a little bit what might have come across on the other side. Because that is, more than 100 million people work in virtual teams or somehow dislocated environment at the moment. This is the place in this environment, we also have to enroll others. However, if things come up, but maybe let's look at the phase of email. Have you ever had the situation where you open up an email and already by the sound of it or by the look at it, you can see the angriness coming up, this does not look, and you open it up and you say, like, what? What is he writing? What is she writing? Unacceptable message. You fire it off back. The other person does the same. What is that? Unacceptable message. You fire it off back and so on. And then this email ping pong starts. I once had a boss from the US. I had 20 people reporting to me. I had a boss in the US who said, well, he wrote emails like, do that. Okay. I was like, well, thank you very much. And then after 2 weeks or so, after I got all these emails back, I talked to him like, this is kind of, is there anything wrong? This is kind of like rude. He said, what? Why? No problem. What do you mean? Well, yeah, I'm used to emails like, dear Lars, can you please do this because of that and that. He's like, well, that's not efficient. That's absolutely inefficient. I just write this. There was no meaning in there. However, for me at that time, he, as my leader, as my boss, so to speak, came across absolutely uninspiring. He didn't have me at all. So, for example, here, that was do that as email tags, how rude of him. My impression of that leader was then very, very, very negative. Let's go to the next one, phone. Have you ever been on the phone call with somebody and you heard the sound? Wait. Yeah, oh yeah. Yeah, oh, brilliant, yeah, fantastic thing. You know, this of typing, we heard of multitasking before, of typing in the background. Of course, how does it make us feel? Not very good. not very engaged and so on. But we want to enroll on that mission if somebody says, oh, yeah, you're really important. No, it is not. So he was typing all the time. He does not care. Blog, at the moment, is becoming more and more fanciful to write and update blogs and so on, microblogging. There, the reaction could be, oh, how surely is somebody who cannot blog. There's even spelling mistakes on it. And then the last one could be video. Video, a whole new skill that we are developing. It's actually quite interesting. Like, how do we come across that video is a whole new field that I encourage you to look at. Once we had a project team meeting, all tuned in by video conference. Some people were working from home. And then one person, Frank, was presenting. But you can really hear the silence. Nobody was listening to him, but we were all watching. Like, what's that in the back? What is that on the right side there? What's that? And I stepped in and asked, like, Frank, what is that there in the back? Is that a teddy bear there in the back? And he turned around, oh, I'm sorry, I'm working from home today. I'm in my kid's room. Now, for us, it was quite okay. It was like a working team. But just imagine that would have been the inspirational speech, so to speak, of the day for the new team or the new client presentation, so to speak. With video, we can talk a lot of stuff, like many people also in video conferences at home. They dress up here, but not here. But when they get up to search something as well, then you will see it. Now, what is the whole point in enrolling others? I think we're so trained to enroll others face-to-face, and yes, it works extremely well. But most of our days, we spend on these means. And what is the key tool that I recommend you to look at? Is to get 21st century communication feedback. Try it out to get to your team, to your managers, to your coworkers, and so on, and try it on these means, on these key means of modern communication, email, video, and so on. Ask them, what is the feedback? And today in the session later this afternoon on virtual teams, we dive really a lot into this further. So now we've enrolled them as well in this new 21st century setup. Now it's a question of enabling. And for enabling, this is all about like removing barriers, but also like enabling the people to do their job right. For this one, I would like to explore a little bit like how you like to be led. How do you all like to be led as well? If you have a manager, even if you have your own company, like basically if you have a steering team and so on that you work with, how do you like to be led? For this, let's draw in two extreme scenarios here. That would be 0, over there would be 10. Over here would be the kind of leadership that goes a little bit like, whatever, you just go, do. Up to 10, that would probably be more the leadership of like, I tell you exactly what to do, and I tell you when to do it, and when you go to the bathroom. These are the two extremes. What I would love to explore is like from 0 to 10, like where you like to be led on this one. I mean, 5 would be somewhere in between. I give you the rough guidance, and somewhere in between, I give you some steps to do it. The rest you figure out. 6 goes a bit more. I tell you here the exact plan. The rest you have to figure out yourself, and so on and so on. So if I were to see a show of hands, who of you would like to be led in the 0 way? Whatever, you do whatever you want. 1, 2, okay, 1, 2, 3, 4. 4-ish, 5, 6, 5, okay, 6, 7, 8. Anybody? No, 9, 10-ish. Nobody over here. All right, so on all, we had roundabout here, I would say the peak around 4, 4.5. And this is wherever I share this, to whichever group I share that is roughly the average. That's what we like. We like to have some direction, but then we want to figure it out ourselves. Now, I want to ask you a different question, but there I don't want to see a show of hands, basically, for this. The question, if you have to lead others, what are you? Are you a 5 as well to the other people? Or are you maybe a little bit more on that side? And my experience, whenever I do this more in in-depth groups, is wherever they are, on average, we are around about a 5. We want to have some direction. But then when it comes to others, oh, well, I take a little bit more control. I go a little bit more in. I tell them what to do a little bit more. We have round about 2 average numbers more than how we treat others typically than how we want to lead ourselves. Now, what I recommend you to look at is therefore a different style, so to speak, of leadership. In order to incorporate this, to get more probably to that 5 level of leadership, what I would recommend you is to develop, the key tool is to be a coach to your teams, to the people that you work with. Now, coaching has a lot of been said. It's been called the leadership style of the 21st century. But I think we can all boil it down to a couple of things. Coaching is all about asking questions and asking the right questions. And frankly, I just want to give you 2 questions for your next time, for your next leadership situations, 2 questions for it. The first question is, what could you do? And the second to 10th question is, what else? What else could you do? If somebody comes with a problem, in order to enable them to do it, maybe you can say, instead of giving directly the answers, okay, you do this, and this, is what could you do? And let the people come up with themselves. Now, this, of course, is extremely dependent on the situation. I mean, we can all imagine the fire truck coming, the fire is burning, the chief brigade comes out, and everybody's like, okay, what do we do now? What could you do? What would you do? What else could you do? Well, what else? No. In that situation, it doesn't work. Of course not. But the day after, when the fire team maybe sets a step back, does a learning experience, and says, what could we have done differently? In that moment, very often people go, okay, you did that wrong, you did that wrong, you did that wrong, next time we need to do X. Here, we can say, what could we do? We need to switch heads, basically, and ask ourselves, okay, what could we have done differently? What could you do? And when I work on this one with leaders, this reads extremely tough. It's one of these things that is easy to explain, very hard to do. They go, okay, I test it out, let me do it, okay. So somebody comes, okay, I have that problem with my steering team and so on. Okay, what could you do? Well, I could contact the right person. That's good. So you contact them, keep me involved, bring in the other people as well, and then send these 2 emails over it. People really need to learn how to bite their tongue maybe on this one, but to let people experience their own way of doing things. So what could you do? What else could you do? Then we come to the next element here in the cycle of leadership. So we've enabled, we've enrolled, we've envisioned. Now it's a question of motivating the team. And again here on motivation, a lot has been said. I go back maybe to the whole area of World of Warcraft. Actually, when you ask like these guild leaders, what do if they don't micromanage, if they don't tell, okay, you do this and you attack the swarm or the dragon on that side, what is it that they do? Very often they say, well, it's 2 things. Half of the time setting direction, the vision. The other half, they are involved in something they call mood management. So one of them writes here on this one, good attitude spreads as well as bad, keep it good. So what he is saying is like, I'm all the time on the chat box to see where's the mood, how's the mood going, and how can I bring it up? Whenever it says, no, we're not going to happen it, that's where I jump in. That's my leadership task here. By the way, if you want to read more about this one in these World of Warcraft fairing, on the pacifistic title battle.net, World of Warcraft, you can read a little bit more about this here. Now, in this word, how do we, in the 21st century, so to speak, how can we do the motivation? What can we do here? For this one, I need to look at one of the most common phenomena these days, and I do look at Facebook. Who of you is on Facebook? If I can see a little show of hands here. Little demand, okay, almost, yeah, 48% on Facebook here. Now we have Facebook, you know it, 1.1 billion people. I recently read shocking news, 6 billion people not yet on Facebook. It's very, very dominant here. Now, for those of you who are on Facebook, what is the #1 activity that you do on Facebook? Sorry? You do what? You like. You like, indeed. You like, I mean, people share stuff of all different kinds. I don't want to comment here. There's all different kinds of stuff being shared, of course, on Facebook, commented and so on. But the #1 thing, and actually where many people derive the success of Facebook is, what we do there is we like. It makes it very easy to like, and all the other social networks have taken this over. Now, if we go back again to the average workplace, and if we take that element of like, what many people, 48% of you do here as well, the question is in the average workplace, how often do we get appraisal or feedback there? Maybe a bit less of the time than we get it at Facebook. Very often I hear like, okay, if you don't hear anything, that means okay. Or maybe you get like at the annual performance review, yeah, that was good. Okay, but apart from this, we don't hear anything. But this new generation, and I can tell you, for those of you who work with this, they crave for feedback as well. And I think we all, the more we work in this kind of areas, the more we can also use and leverage this kind of way of motivating and so on, the kind of like. So the tool that I have for you is maybe not to use Facebook and not to like everything, but to praise often, praise fast, and praise easy. How would we go about this? I mean, how do we do this? How do we put this in practice? When do we praise? It's like, wow, fantastic, you've made a photocopy. That's excellent. No. That would probably be not the right thing. Well, you're back. Wow, super. You're on time. No, of course not. I mean, like to go back to a key tip that by the author Ken Blanchard. He said, like, well, you know, praising is easy. It goes within 1 minute you can do it, and I would dare to say even with less time. A good job well done message and so on can be written even faster by email. But it's basically, how can we learn this, or where should we do praisal? I go back to my experience being a father of 2 young daughters now at the moment. They're 4 and 6 now. But I think we all have it inherently in us, and when to praise and how to praise. Because if we think back how we used to learn a language and how we helped others used to learn a language, it's all within us, like when we should praise and when not. How do we teach? Like a 6-month-old, a 1-year-old, a 1 or 12, 15-month-old? When they start babbling something, we go, wow, that's fantastic. Papa, yeah, that was Papa, that was great. That was Daddy, Axel, fantastic. It goes a bit more, bathroom, blah, 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 blah. Okay, well, fantastic, she can say bathroom. That's excellent. When they are probably, I'm not yet there, but probably when they're 17 years old, Sunday morning at 11, and they say, where do I have to go? Bathroom, bathroom. You would not say, well, that's fantastic anymore. That's exactly also how we need to praise. Of course, people around us are not kids, but what we have to see is like, where are they on the development stage? Are they learning a new skill, and have they made a step forward? And that is the moment when there was a step forward, job well done, where we can do appraisal, and we say, okay, that was great, that was the right direction. So praise often, much more often than the annual review, and give more of that instant appraisal that we have become used to. Then we come to the final one, and here's really where leadership more directed towards people, towards effectiveness and so on, meets, I think, also management. It's the implementation. The blogger Seth Godin says leadership. At the end of the day, we need to execute something. We need to bring something forward. And for this, I came across recently a study by Hayes. I mean, there's many studies. You guys are, of course, experts in project management. But they said, you know, why do projects fail? There was a study by a couple more than 200 people. They asked, like, why do projects fail in your organization? What do people agree to? First, missing objectives, but then the decision process. Important decision not being taken, and maybe the wrong decisions being taken. And this one I want to explore a little bit more here on the implementation, because I think one of the things in implementation as leaders we can do is improve our decision-making process. And here I think, having studied this a little bit more in depth, also both with my university work, but also my practical work, here I think what science knows, so to speak, and what we do in our organizations is a bit apart. Let's explore that a little bit together. I mean, first of all, we have heard already, like, on some tools on new ways of decision-making, different, like, more democratic meetings and so on. And what we look at is as well as what is called AND algorithms. So these are some ANDs over there. What we can learn from ANDs on how they communicate, what we can learn on this one for our meetings. More on this one in the virtual teams session this afternoon. But what I want to really zoom in is probably something that is relevant for all of you. That is the way and the kind of like mistakes, so to speak, or pitfalls that we can do in our decision-making. Some of you might know that in the year 2002, the Nobel Prize for Economics was awarded not to an economist, but to a psychologist, Daniel Kahneman, together with the person as deceased there, together with his colleague Tversky. They founded, back in the 70s and 80s, they founded what's called the prospect theory on decision-making. And they basically discarded our views on decision-making. Because we tend to think of ourselves, and we heard brilliant examples of it this morning in Change, I think we tend to think of ourselves, no, everything is going to go right, everything is going to go fine, and we'll do fantastic decisions. Now, they looked at it and said, like, I don't know. And I think we can learn a lot from this one for our decision making. So what I want to do with you is to look at some questions from that research, so to speak, on decision making. And I want to do just 2 or 3 little questions together with you. And what I want to do is to just pick one answer. Okay, just pick one answer that comes from the gut, so to speak. And then we're going to look at it together. Okay? Don't worry at all about being right or wrong. Like, just pick the first one. Trust me, I did 200 of those questions, and I had 80% wrong in the first one. These people are very smart in designing them, so to mislead you, so to speak. So what I want to do, I will read the question out loud, but then let's look at this one. Let's take a look at the decisions that we take right now and what that means for our organizations. So I want to ask you a typical question here, one about Linda. Linda is 31 years old, single, outspoken, and very bright. She majored in philosophy. As a student, she was deeply concerned with issues of discrimination and social justice, and also participated in anti-nuclear demonstrations. Now, question to you now. What is the most likely alternative? Linda is a bank teller. She works in a bank and hands on the money. Or Linda is a bank teller and is active in the feminist movement. Pick A or B, and maybe write it even down. Okay. That was for Linda. By the way, if you want to read more about this, Daniel Kahneman has just published a very great book, Thinking Fast and Slow, on this one. From a different field, from a different study, and don't worry, we will not go and we will not share the results here, but I would like to ask you your qualities as a driver in a car, okay, as a car driver. Would there be A, well above average, B, above average, C, average, D, below average, or E, well below average? And you can choose one of those at the moment. Let's look at them. And don't worry, again, I mean, in some of them there's no right or wrong, but I would love to explore it a little bit what that means for a corporate context. First, the first one, on Linda. Can I see a little show of hands who is A on this one? Who thinks it's A? Okay. Who is B? Hopefully. C? Good. Okay, we're there. Roughly distributed here. Now, in hindsight, is always great. If you know the answers and so on, that's fine. This question here is actually a very interesting one because it can be answered like this. You don't need all the text with it. Yeah? Taking a step back. If you have a choice between something that is Linda is a bank teller and something that is Linda is a bank teller and something, the smaller one, the A, will always be more likely because that was the question. Because whatever you say, like this, I mean, B is a subset, so to speak, you can say, of A. However, we have, of course, read about her, and we've got to know her, and we've seen what she does. And that's why the people who've probably chosen B, and I chose B at the beginning, felt like, wow, that is, we read it, that is actually pretty likely. What this is called is information bias. We take the information that is out there available and put it together into our decisions. And they've looked at very interesting stuff around this. They've looked at something what is called the captain syndrome. They looked at school children, 12-year-olds, and so on, and how they solve texts, answers, and problems in school. So they looked at things like this. There are 12 cows, 4 sheep, and 8 pigs on board a ship. How old is the captain? What's the captain's age? And people started calculating and so on. So 12 times 4 minus 8 and so on. Huh? Now, and of course, in this context now, we find, how would we ever do that? I've been in projects on logistics assumptions where people are like, wow, what's our logistics scenario? Setting up very similar scenarios like what we've heard about the risk calculation. Okay, so what kind of assumptions shall we take? Well, it's a bit of shipment cost to China, so what is it? Okay, I have some data here from 3 years ago. Let me take this, let me put it into the model. Let's see what else do we have available in terms of assumptions. We put it together and calculate and make it ourselves. Now, for those of you who are a bit of logistics, knowing that you can't just take any rate and apply it, first of all, 3 years later, and definitely not like, oh, you can say like, okay, from Europe to China is the same as like China to Europe. There can be a 10 times difference. But what is the human nature is like to take stuff and to put it somewhere into a model. Next one, so is the estimates of the car driver. Now, I don't want to see now a show of hands here. But I imagine that on average, we will have put ourselves here above average. And that is what we found all over again. When people are being asked, like, okay, how well do you, university teachers or school teachers, how well do you teach? People put themselves as higher and so on, as above average. This is called Lake Wobegon effect sometimes because of the story of Lake Wobegon, where all the kids are intelligently above average, so to speak. Now, this is something, this is called like the overestimation or overconfidence bias, where people think of themselves too highly. Now, we can discuss this. You can say like, well, yeah, but we are better drivers and so on. But interesting enough, like many mergers and acquisitions, and I've studied a lot, new product launches can be attributed back to the place where people said, oh yeah, no problem, it's going to be right. We will fix it somehow. The failures, other people do. Now, that now combined with the probably one of the most famous experiments in psychology that you might have heard about, which is called the Asch experiment. Now we go one step further, and then we bring it back to the organization of today. This person, Solomon Asch, in 1956, did a very interesting thing, very mean thing, you might say. He brought back together a person or a group of people to study conformity and how people change their decisions. Now they put them in the room and showed them this thing. What you have to know, 7 of the people were actually actors. And only one person was the real object. So what they then said is, like, look at the thing on the left, and which ones on the right does it resemble the most? Yeah? Which one on the right has the same height? Okay? What they then started, the person who was randomly selected was on number 8, so they started 1, A. And 33% of the people said A. Even if they'd known it, no, of course, it's not A. And they were asked later, like, well, why bother? Why the heck? Why the trouble? This is known as Groupthink Dilemma, and we know it a lot from, I've been in finance, basically. I know it a lot, where people are like, oh, it's going to be great. Now see how all things come together. Information stuff that is out there, information bias. Oh, well, let's put a model somehow together, tuck, 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 tuck. Then we build it a little bit up. Then we think like, yeah, we've done the best analysis in the world. We're fantastic here, tuck, 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 tuck. And anybody, any questions? Anybody agrees? Oh, well, yeah, oh, fine. Then we can see how these decisions can lead really to disaster. What I recommend you to do, the tool that I have for you in implementing and executing this, is a very simple thing, but here as a leader, that the leader needs to do is to install a devil's advocate position. Installing a person whose role it is to find out everything that speaks against the project, the decision, and so on that we're doing at the moment. And to gather stuff where we say like, yeah, you have to find more, show us everything. Then the person has the role. Because for those of you who are more in the, for example, finance data or critical functions, when you work together with this, yeah, it's going to be fine, it's going to be fine. When you also, yeah, but what about, don't be a naysayer and so on. We don't want that. This is not pleasant. But if you know you're being rewarded by, okay, now I want to hear everything that speaks against that project, that is powerful. Then it's okay. Then it's like, okay, yeah, I've come up with quite a lot. And then, as a team and as a leader, you can make the right decision for it. I think here, when it comes to decision making, when it comes to looking at this one, the key thing there is be a realist when making a decision and an optimist when implementing it, and not the other way around. And very often we see it the other way around. Optimist, yeah, it's going to be fine, and then, how do we think this is right? Be a realist when making the decision and thinking about the biases that are out there. We've looked at the whole areas, the fundamentals of it, not being a micromanager, basically, because otherwise, especially in these swarm-based projects, people just, they go out. It's a terrible time to be a control freak. And vision, and there specifically look out for things that have been done, like the stories and so on, where showing what's possible. Enrolling others, and they're thinking, especially in this 21st century, communication that is out there. Like that we know about our virtual image, what that is, and how we can enroll and how we get across in this side. Enable others by being and adopting a coaching leadership style, motivating them by praising often and implementing by reviewing the decision process and installing, for example, devil's advocate position. What I recommend people to do, and maybe for the break, for this afternoon, for the cocktail, whenever it is to really set yourself as well and rate yourself on this one. On these 6 things, what I very often do, and you can do it very easily, looking at it, building like a little spider, and seeing from the center, there's 0, up until the maximum of these 6 elements, there would be 5. How would you rate yourself? 0 being like, envision like her, what's a vision? Up until 5, hey, I'm really, really good at this one. Same as motivation. 0 being like, I never give any feedback. And so on, up until 6 or 5 being like, hey, I'm very good at this one. And look at where you are. Typically, sometimes I have 2 extremes, I would say. Sometimes we have the visionary, and many of you will have met the people as well. Somebody who's really like his grand dreams, who's always out there, and who thinks, oh, yeah, we should be doing that, and one day, and very easy to take a football team to the Bundesliga or something like this. We put a vision and so on, but then there's nothing else. And for the people on that team, that very often is a little bit frustrating. There's like, well, there's nothing happening behind that vision here. So there, I would be careful. There's the other element, though, the other extreme that I very often see, which is like the implementer, the executor, the person who is very good at getting only the things done and so on, which is great, which is sometimes needed. But if we want to change something, if we want to achieve something, and want to get people on board, like the reaction sometimes can be like, well, fine. I mean, it's just about this, but what's the grander picture? What's the why that we had heard on this one here? What is this one? How can we engage people in it? So make that assessment for yourself. And just stressing a point, so make that assessment for yourself and see like where you are, how you can develop. I mean, we don't have to have the strength everywhere, but how can you develop to be like a well-rounded leader, so to speak, on these fields? The last element what I want to keep you with, and that's maybe also the bridge to this morning's session, which is probably also the key to leadership in the 21st century, and they made some very interesting studies at Google and compared like also Bob Sutton from Stanford, he made an interesting study like looking at leadership, what people expected 20 years ago and what they expect now. Some things have changed, but some fundamentals are still the same, be it in the high technology field or not. And the key to this one, we've heard it before as well, but I would just want to re-stress it, was mentioned to me by the very first person I had the privilege to be the leader or manager, you can say. Because he was facing me directly with a tough leadership challenge. He was said, like, hey, Lars, yeah, I'm in your team now. The first thing that I want to do is I want to change the email policy because I want to include a quote in my email tagline, in my company email. Like, well, fine. And so on. So like, no, it's against the policy. No. I want to have this. That's for me. That's a no-no. Not to have it. Okay, fine. And I'm happy that I allowed it because that reminded me of that quote time and again. And the quote went as follows. He or she who has a why to live can bear almost any how. He or she who has a why to live can bear almost any how. And as we know, same for change, same in general, like providing in the leadership roles that we have, providing that why, just as a reminder, is so important. Also, if we are virtually distributed in project swarms wherever we are. So that is the fundamental task that we have on this one. And with that, I wish you a great break now and a great rest of the conference. Thank you very much for that.